Alright guys, as I'm looking outside the window right over there, I can see people on bikes with children. It's the Easter weekend. We're in the middle of this terrible outbreak here in the UK. People don't really care. They're like, yeah, I guess I'll social distance a little bit, but let's take a bike ride. Problematic. This video, however, is not talking about this. In this video, I'm going to talk about 10 things that will potentially, it's mostly me speculating and taking cues from very intelligent people who made statements about what might be permanently changed after we return to some kind of normality. And by the end of this video, stick around for that, because then I'm going to talk about what is actually necessary for us in order to return to some kind of normality. Let's go with number one. And some of these are positive, some of them are negative, so it's a mix of both kind of. But yeah, number one, currently employers are forced to provide home office setups for a lot of people. And a lot of employers never thought about this before. Where I used to work, like agencies, ad agencies and stuff, people are like, boss, could I do 1 day a week from home? No, what do you think you are? You can't work from home, right? That was like this hostile attitude of like heads of companies. At least I encountered that, while employees are very scared to even ask if they can. And I think that will be shifting now. Right now, rather than saying, hey, why should we do this online? Let's just meet in person. Like, why should you work from home? How are you going to join this meeting if you're working from home? Now we're going to say, do we need to do this in person? Right? Is it actually necessary that we meet in person and go through this, or can we just do it online? So I think the perception of the importance of actually being in a room will shift. And personally, I think that was long overdue. Many more companies should have done that many, many years, because if you have the right network and the right software in place, you do not all need to sit in a room. Like, that is such an ancient idea of working. It does come with some benefits, but I think this will potentially bring like a positive shift and change towards more people working from home. And that kind of leads to number two, which is that if you live on the countryside and you have very bad internet, you're kind of screwed. So that means, because you can't partake in a lot of jobs and works where companies are like, yeah, you can work from home from your small village, but you're going to need like whatever it is, 100 Mbits, 200 Mbits internet, so we can do video conferences, you can share files, you can do all the things. Oh, well, you don't have that? Well, we can't hire you then. So there's a new problem evolving, which might lead to larger broadband connectivity, right? Where smaller villages are connected to fast fiber internet just so people can actually participate in jobs that require fast internet. So it's another positive thing, potentially positive thing, coming out of this wider broadband network of fast internet in the countrysides around the world. And it's a big problem here in the UK. It's a big problem in Germany, where I originally come from. So yes, please, more fast internet, please, everywhere. Now, due to the experience that China has with the current outbreak, they are managing fairly well. I know a lot of people are like, oh, China's lying and all the numbers are fake. And it's like, and to an extent, that's true. Nobody says that China is telling everyone the truth and the numbers they said about who died and stuff are accurate. Nobody's saying that. However, my family, my wife is Chinese, so we have contacts to China. We talk to many people in many different cities regularly in China, and the situation has normalized. I don't say there are no cases anymore or that it's perfect, but they did manage pretty well because of the previous experience. Like, they had SARS, they had other outbreaks. People are just wearing masks. People are not that obsessed with their individual freedom and of going out and, it's Easter weekend. I have to sunbath with my family. I do it every year. Like, a lot of these attitudes that you see in the West, China doesn't have that so much, not in a comparable way. So they manage fairly well. USA doesn't. Okay, the US is a catastrophe right now. I mean, I can't say much. I'm here in the UK. It's equally bad, nearly. But the US just does not manage very well. And in retrospect, looking back 20, 25 years from now to what's happening, this right now might be the tipping point where the power kind of shifts from the West, from the US, over to Asia, to China. And in 25 years, we're looking back and say, yeah, well, that was the point where the US failed horribly and China actually managed fairly well, where the power shifted. And I know a lot of people, if you're watching this from the US, you're like, no, that's not possible. It's the greatest nation on earth. We're the best. Look at those guns. Yeah, I think at some point you got to face reality. Like a lot of economists and professionals have been predicting it for a very long time, that China will be taking over, becoming like the most powerful nation, or the most economical powerful nation in the world. And I think, again, this might be the tipping point right now where we see that shift, the ultimate shift from the US to China. Number 4, an important one, because we've seen a shift in populism and insularism. That is a word. I looked it up, which basically means that people say, no, we don't care about anyone. We go first. America first. Brexit. We don't need the EU. We don't need anyone. We are the best. And look at us, how strong we are. And we used to be an empire. And we are the greatest people on this planet. Now, a lesson we're learning right now is that only when people work together and pull together, we can potentially overcome challenges like the one we're experiencing right now. For example, those 3D printed valves. I don't know if you heard about this, but there were like valves that were required to operate ventilators, and the company selling them is like, yeah, they're $11,000 per valve. High five. And then some guy with a 3D printer was like, hey, well, I can produce those for $1. If I just 3D print them 24 hours around the clock, I'm 3D printing, and everybody gets valves. Then that company tried to sue him and like, oh, you're our product. But we can see like now there's a whole network of people around the world who offer their 3D printing facilities to solve problems like this. And they share plans for 3D prints, and they come together from around the world to solve problems. They're printing, like 3D printing face shields, like protective equipment for the staff on the front lines. Information about vaccines is exchanged, laboratories working together in order to more quick come to some kind of result, all while Trump is like, no, but we get the vaccine first. Nobody else gets it. And I think hopefully, is very optimistic, hopefully enough people see what's going on at the moment, and they're like, actually, togetherness is kind of better than building a wall. Yes, you get downsides with, I don't know what it is, like, too many people with bad intentions immigrating into your country. And there are a lot of things you can talk about. I understand that. But in the overall bigger picture, the importance of working together rather than building walls and saying us first is the way forward. Not only in this crisis, like in the bigger picture, it's the way forward. And I hope that what's happening right now, and especially when we return to some kind of normality, that people are like, well, actually, look at what happened, and pulling together actually made it even possible that we are where we are now. So hopefully there's a little bit of shift away from this popularism and insularism to more towards like a form of togetherness. Hypothetically, very hypothetical. I don't know. Let's give humanity a chance of seeing that. Hopefully we won't be disappointed. Number 5. Now, we'll see new levels of surveillance, okay? Because one way out of this mess is, or at least like one brick in the puzzle that might get us out of this, is that we just have to surveil everybody. Everywhere you go, you use your phone will be tracked. And if you were close to someone who then later turns out to be infected, you'll get a text message that says, hey, last week you were close, very close, and for a minute you were close to that person, at a bus stop, for example. And now you need to quarantine for 2 weeks and see if you maybe got infected from it. Because that is a way of actually, with an automated service, reducing the amount of infections, right? Because you can track it very well. I already spoke to people in Germany. People in Germany are very sensitive about this, about any form of surveillance. And they're like, well, I'm just going to leave my phone at home. It's like, okay, that's not how people in Germany talk, is it? But, that's kind of their solution. They're like, I'll just leave it at home. And sure, you can do this, but I think it's not only that, whether it's like heat sensors or other forms of political positional tracking, or whether it's public cameras that scan your face and say, hey, that good guy should be in quarantine. I think we'll see new levels of surveillance which are justified by the emerging fear of a new outbreak, so to say. So, there will be a lot of political stance against it, and people will be upset that that's happening. The whole Orwellian type of vision coming true under the umbrella of this virus, which is terrible. But in my opinion, if it helps to move to some kind of normality, then do it for now. But, in the moment you initiate it, you also need to say, where is the line that we draw to remove it again? Okay, you need to say, yeah, all the surveillance, we put it in place, but at point X, when we are at these cases, or this is the situation, we will remove those surveillance platforms or mechanisms for good, right? So yeah, it's a very, very tricky question, whether we should do it, whether it's a good idea, whether it even has the result that we hope. We've seen it in Singapore, for example. They've done something similar and it worked very well. So I think mass surveillance will be coming our way. Number 6. Oh, camera shaking. Number 6. Mental issue. Mass mental issues due to long-term isolation. Now that's something we haven't explored too much. What happens if you just lock a whole country, like 1/3 of the world, probably more by now, just lock them in their homes for 2 months or something close to that? We don't know the effects, but what I think will happen is a lot of people will struggle for a long time to, for example, feel comfortable in big crowds. I can already speak for myself. When I even see like people in big crowds hugging and being very close on TV, I'm like, oh God, no, don't do that. Don't go so close. I think, that will last for quite a while, that up to the point where we can go back to a concert and be in a crowd of 10,000 people. I don't know. I won't be comfortable with that for a very long time, and it will always kind of have a bitter side taste to me. Not for everybody. Some people will be like, well, there are not many cases, are there? So I don't mind. Cool, bro. But I think for many, many people, this will be a problem, and it will just not feel right, if that makes sense. And generally, I think like this long-term isolation will really leave its mark on this generation. Like, for example, we can see divorce rates in China going up. We can see an increase in alcohol consumption, people relapsing to smoking and all that due to people being nervous, being scared, being uncertain about what's going on. So it's kind of reasonable. But again, it kind of plays into the mental health issue. And I think there are a lot of outcomes that at the moment just can't be predicted, where people really have long-term issues, nearly like a trauma coming out of this situation. And we've seen people actually talking about their experience when they were on ICUs, intensive care, very traumatic experiences they talk about. So the mass mental health issue that might potentially be coming out of this, not to underestimate. Number 7. Now, number 7 is an interesting one, and it's a positive one, potentially, as well. And what I want to talk about is the Renaissance, because the Renaissance was, at least amongst other reasons, initiated by a disease, right? I believe it was the bubonic plague that was before that, and many, many people died, and it was a horrible time, which ultimately led to new structures being established. For example, people could get into a position of power that previously they couldn't get in. And there was just kind of a shuffle in society, which later on turned out to be quite positive. So this virus could be initiating change, positive change. And maybe in 100 years' time, we're going to look back at now and be like, well, actually, as horrible as this was, but ultimately what happened after that was that a lot of things changed for the better. And for example, younger people could come into leading positions in politics and make significant decisions that the older people wouldn't do, which are in that position right now because they want to protect their values and they're very much, conservative. So maybe somewhere in there is some opportunity hidden in the long run that will lead to positive change. And looking at what happened in the Renaissance time might be interesting and relevant for what we're doing, going through now. Just a thought. Number 8. And that one is probably the biggest one. It's the economic effect, the economic ripple effect of this. Because right now I see a lot of people being like, well, who cares about the economy? We have to protect our people, and society is like measured by how they treat their old and weak. And we really need to protect the old. And yes, I completely agree. Right now we should do this. And, the lockdown is the right thing to do. It's at the moment the only way to even remotely control what's going on. But the economic effects are not to underestimate. What I mean by that is at the moment right now we are in the worst recession since 1920, maybe even the worst recession of all time. And let's just for a second assume that the global economy, oops, I hit the mic there, the global economy ball shrinks by 30%. Okay, let's just assume that for a second, that once we kind of return to a normality, we've lost 30% of employees, businesses, right? Not only does that put like a huge responsibility to financial responsibility to governments and to countries of compensating for those people who don't have work, companies who shut down, but also this can lead to massive shortages on basic goods. Less so in Western countries, not to say that we are safe in Western countries from this, but especially in developing countries, you don't have a very solid infrastructure of supplies. And if certain supply key points are falling off, like for example, a business that produces a certain type of flour for a certain product is just gone, and they can't get hold of that, they now can't produce their bread anymore, and it's a chain reaction where suddenly, you might have a massive hunger crisis. Here in the West, I live in London and whole Europe and probably the US as well. We have fairly solid infrastructure, so I believe there will be shortages on certain goods where they're like, oh, well, you can't get that tomato sauce anymore. Well, we're just going to eat more vegetables then, or we're going to eat something else that is available. So the problem here hopefully won't get too bad. But again, in developing countries, this is potentially a massive issue that can lead to hunger crisis, and even things like your local electricity power plant can't be repaired because it needs a certain part that is manufactured in Italy and it's not been done, and that company shut down, and now you can't get the replacement part, so there's no electricity. Or your water cleaning facility needs replacement parts to fix their facility and they can't get hold of them. So now people have to deal with dirty water. Maybe it's the only water they have. What are they going to do? They're going to drink it because they don't want to die. Now they get sick. Now you have another disease. It's a whole potentially chain reaction of negative ripples that come out of these lockdowns, that come out of this damage that we're currently accepting to the economy. And I think that's also why people like Boris Johnson, and specifically Trump, is like, oh, no, we got to open the economy again. We got to quickly go back. And it's not just about him. He's a complete dick. We all know that. But it's not just about him shoveling money into his pocket. It's also about the bigger picture of avoiding like these shortages. Because let's just hypothetically say in America, after we come down from this 2-3 months later, there's a shortage of food, And people at the moment in the US, they're not only emptying all the toilet paper shelves and the food shelves, they're also emptying the gun shelves. Okay, so everybody's stacking up on guns. So now you have a nation where people potentially don't have enough to eat. There's not enough available to go around in the markets, and everybody's got guns. When people don't have food for their children, they do weird things. Okay, they start to do terrible things. This is obviously a worst case scenario, but it's not impossible. And if we're not careful with what we're doing, the effects, the economic effects coming out of this can be absolutely devastating. Another aspect is like, what are all these people going to do? Like if you have these crazy food shortages in developing countries, in Africa, in India, people don't have food. What are they going to do? They're going to say, well, we're going where the food is. Okay, and now you have millions of people moving around the planet trying to get to the US, trying to get to Europe, trying to get to different places where there's food, which is fully understandable, right? You don't want to starve. You're not like, well, I'm not going to sit here, do nothing. I'm going to try to get to where the food is. So now you have like mass immigration, millions of people trying to, and it causes another problem. So the economic effects of what we're doing right now are not to underestimate. Maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, and I hope we're just coming out of this and slowly building up the economy again, and everyone will be fine, and we won't have shortages on supplies, and everything will be jolly good. But the risk is there, the danger is there, and I think we need to be aware of it. Number 9. People who already had the virus might build their own communities, okay? And you might get a little pass that says, hey, he already had it and he has recovered. It's confirmed. So then you could imagine immune-only parties, right? You could imagine like Tinder having its own little tab that's like immune-only, right? You need to put in your little number, your NHS healthcare number or whatever, and it's like, oh yeah, he's had it and he's recovered. So now you're in this Tinder section where there's only people who have recovered, and little community builds where people who haven't had the disease yet are excluded. They're like, no, we don't want you here. You might infect all of us. We only want people that already had it and have recovered and are immune now. So I think that's interesting as well, like that there potentially might be little communities building themselves that are just about being immune and being amongst, people also immune. And the last point, number 10, climate change researchers will have incredible data coming out of this that potentially might underline their theories, right? Like, how does the air quality improve if traffic is reduced by 80% for a month, for example, right? That's a number you could have never got hold of before. But now we're forced to such a grinding halt that it actually becomes possible, right? It actually is a thing where we can hopefully take that data that's being gathered right now, the effects on the Earth's atmosphere, and you can see in Venice, the canals are clearing up, and how quickly, if we reduce everything we do, how quickly does the world recover, the nature recover, and all that. Like, it will give researchers incredibly valuable information that they could have never obtained if not everyone would be forced to stop everything they do at the moment. So that's another kind of positive aspect where people hopefully can say, look guys, we did the math, and if we only reduce X amount of this, we can have a long-lasting impact like that, okay? Which again, hopefully leads a bit more credibility to climate change, because the way we're treating this virus at the moment is very reminiscent of how we're treating climate change. And climate change is in the far distance, right? And before the virus was here, everyone was like, it's fine. It's not going to come here. We don't need to lock down early. This is okay. And then it just hits us in the face. Now with this virus, there are kind of some ways out of it, maybe. But with something like climate change, if it's too late, it's too late. There is no way out of it. And you, me, we're probably not going to be there to witness it, or maybe in our very late stages of life. But a lot of kids, our kids, will be in the heart of that storm, of that hurricane. And you need to look how horrible your life is right now, being locked down, not being able to go out, having all these kind of surveillance methods and all this stuff being imposed on you. You're doing this to your kids. If you're denying climate change and you're not actively trying to do your part in reducing it, you're doing what you're going through right now times 10 to your children. And I hope that what we're seeing right now, the data we're right now gathering, can lend a bit more credibility to that in the future. And that's it. Those are 10 points. However, don't leave. I want to talk about two quick things. The first one is just an interesting fact. And that is the thought that patient zero, right, the guy who first contracted this virus, is the single person in the world who had, in the history of humanity, the biggest impact on the economy, the biggest impact on millions of people's lives, right? And that, it's not a big politician. Like, it's just a random guy, being attacked by an animal or eating an animal or whatever exactly the original reason was. But that man, like a normal guy, by making one wrong decision, had such an enormous, unprecedented impact on the world, on the economy, on everyone's life. That's crazy to me. Like that's possible in 2020 or 2019, in our times anyway. It's crazy, that one normal person has that kind of impact. Now, before we close this video, if you're still here, thanks so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it if you made it to the very end. But I want to talk about two things, and that is moving forward, right? Because a lot of people are kind of working on scenarios how we might be getting out of this. And there are different scenarios from the right, from the left, different political spectrum, but the message from most of them is the same. One solution, quotation mark solution, I already spoke about, is this mass surveillance, right? That is like everybody's got an app, everybody's tracked 24 hours. If anyone tests positive, everybody who's been close to that person gets a message and has to quarantine. And it's like a mass surveillance solution to the problem, which obviously in the West will hit massive political boundaries. People will not want to implement anything like this, and they'll fight to stop this from happening. So it's I think, technically challenging, but even more so politically challenging to implement something like this. And the other again, solution, if you want to call it that, is mass testing. Okay, and what I mean by that is you literally have to test your whole population every 2 weeks. Okay, everybody has to be tested every 2 weeks, so you can always, and that means, like, what was the number? I think in America it was like 22 million tests a day. That's obviously the US population, which is higher than here in the UK. But it's such a monstrous amount that I don't even see how it's physically possible to do that, because not only do you need to get to 20 million people, or let it just be 5 million people every day you need to put something in their mouth, put in a little testing tube, run it through a machine, and then have a system that kicks out like results to all those people. Do you know what I mean? Like it's unthinkable. At the moment here in the UK, we're struggling to get up to 20,000 tests a day. 20,000, and we're talking about millions. So mass surveillance, difficult on many levels. Mass testing, I'm not saying impossible, but equally, if not more difficult on many levels. So it's not good, is it? That's the only kind of two ways forward that experts are looking at, and they see even to be remotely feasible or useful or have an impact. So yeah, guys, that's the end of the video. It's all the thoughts I wanted to share with you guys. Originally, I wanted to put some gameplay in the background like I do in my other videos, but I thought it feels kind of inappropriate to have gameplay, so I decided to show my face. I'm sorry for that. It's the only one I have. It's the one God gave me. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video anyway. I hope you learned something. I hope it sparked a few thoughts. I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on all the points I made down in the comment section below. You can subscribe to the channel. You can like the video. That would really help. That would be great. And even if you didn't like it, share your thoughts, why you didn't like it, why you disagree down in the comments below. Again, I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed. Take care. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And stay a bit more than 2 meters away from people. Just in case. Make it 3 meters. Like make it 9 feet instead of 6 feet. Make it a bit more. All right, guys. Stay safe. I'll see you next time. I'm out.